the gut-brain connection, from motility to mood. Before we go any further, we've got to stop and address this fascinating topic. The brain has a direct effect on the stomach and intestines. For example, the very thought of eating can release the stomach's juices before food gets there. Now, this connection goes both ways. A troubled intestine can send signals to the brain, just as a troubled brain can send signals to the gut. Therefore, a person's stomach or intestinal distress can be the cause or the product of anxiety, stress, or depression. And that's because the brain and the GI system are intimately connected. This is especially true in cases where a person experiences GI upset with, let's say, no obvious physical cause. For these functional GI disorders, it's difficult to try to heal a distressed gut without considering the role of stress and emotion. The brain and the GI system are intimately connected in what we call the gut-brain axis. Given how closely the gut and brain interact, it becomes easier to understand why, let's say, you may feel nauseated before giving a presentation or feel intestinal pain during times of stress. Now, that doesn't mean that GI conditions are imagined or that it's all in your client's head, because psychology combined with physical factors to cause pain and bowel symptoms is legit. Psychosocial factors influence the actual physiology of the gut as well as our symptoms. In other words, stress or depression or other psychological factors can affect movement and contractions of the GI tract and therefore elimination. Throughout history, doctors have been well acquainted with the idea that the stomach and mind were somehow connected, and this interaction could produce positive or negative physical and even mental health impacts. Just like we covered in the physiology section, scientists are well aware that the brain controls the digestive system via nerves and reflexes. What is newer information is understanding that what is happening in the gut travels back up and has an effect on the brain. Nowadays, their interconnectedness and their pathways of communication between the digestive organs and the brain are the focus of a lot of attention. Over the last decade or so, research into the gut-brain axis has grown exponentially as microbiologists, neurologists, nutrition scientists have all revised their understanding of how seemingly separate bodily areas interact. Our guts, brains, nervous system, and behavior are now considered as far more interconnected than presumed. Recent studies show that your brain affects your gut health and your gut affects your brain health. This info is so very OT because it connects the brain to the body. Its framework matches ours. Now, this is cutting edge stuff, and down the road will definitely influence our work. Keep an eye on it. It's going places. We need to know that this is bigger than most textbooks are teaching us. We need to know that the interconnections so that we can refer out or co-treat all at the same time. All right. The GI system actually has its own nervous system called the enteric nervous system, or ENS for short. We say it's its own nervous system when technically we have one nervous system with subdivisions, but we will call those subdivisions nervous system. Let's back up and get a broad view so that we have some context for the ENS. The nervous system is the system of the body that is responsible for regulating all of the systems of the body to maintain homeostasis. It is the only system of the body that interacts with every other single part of the body. The job of the nervous system is to monitor the body's internal and external environment, to integrate sensory information, and to direct or coordinate the responses of the organ systems based on input. The autonomic nervous system is the component of the peripheral nervous system that regulates involuntary physiological processes. This is things like heart rate, right? Blood pressure, respiration, digestion, even sexual arousal. It contains three automatically distinct divisions: sympathetic, parasympathetic, and enteric. Activation of the SNS leads to a state of overall elated activity. Activation of the SNS leads to a state of overall elevated activity and attention, the fight or flight response. In this process, blood pressure and heart rate increase. GI peristalsis ceases. Right? The SNS innervates nearly every living tissue in the body, whereas the PNS promotes the rest and digest processes, right? Heart rate, blood pressure lowering, GI and peristalsis digestion restarts. So the PNS innervates only the head, viscera, and external genitalia, notably vacant in much of the musculoskeletal system and skin, making it so much smaller than the SNS. The ENS is comprised of reflex pathways that control the digestive functions of a muscle contraction and relaxation, secretion and absorption, and blood flow. So now we go back to those three main jobs of the nervous system, and let's put the enteric nervous system in the same context. Number one, it monitors the body's internal and external environments, right? It integrates sensory information. And number three, it directs or coordinates the responses of the organ systems based on the input. The enteric nervous system communicates back and forth with our brain. The enteric nervous system is embedded in the lining of the GI tract. It is two thin layers of more than 100 million nerve cells in the lining of the GI tract from esophagus to rectum. And it's known as the second brain or the gut brain. The main role of the enteric nervous system is controlling digestion, from swallowing to the release of enzymes that break down food to the control of blood flow that helps with nutrient absorption to elimination. The ENS controls the mechanical mixing of food in the stomach and coordinating muscle contractions to basically move it through the gut, right? It also maintains the biochemical environment within different sections of the gut, keeping them at the correct pH and chemical composition needed for digestive enzymes to do their job. The amazing thing about the enteric nervous system is that it's capable of being autonomous in the absence of the CNS, the central nervous system, the brain and spine, and its input. So, for instance, the sensory neurons of the ENS report mechanical and chemical conditions, while the motor neurons of the ENS control peristalsis and the churning of intestinal contents through the intestinal muscles. Other neurons control the secretion of enzymes. So all of these neurons act on their own, although it receives considerable innervation from the automatic nervous system. It can and does operate independently of the brain and the central nervous system, right? The fact that it can act independently is one of the reasons the enteric nervous system has been described as the second brain. Understanding that the digestive system has been its own autonomous nervous system actually has not always been a given. A pioneer in the field of the enteric nervous system was a physician named Byron Robinson. He was a pioneer in connecting the dots to the gut-brain connection. So back in 1907, he published The Abdominal and Pelvic Brain, which talked about reflexes, visceral drainage, and the mental and emotional conditions that resulted from irritation to the abdominal and visceral system. Robinson's observations identified a vast and highly complex neuronal network contained within the abdominal viscera, which was shown to independently influence and regulate autonomic processes, including peristalsis, blood flow, secretion, and absorption. Now, a second pioneer was a physiologist named Johannes Langley, who actually coined the term enteric nervous system back in 1921. He discovered that if the gut's main connection with the brain, which is the vagus nerve, is severed, the enteric nervous system will still remain capable of coordinating digestion. This means that it became clear that the enteric nervous system can act autonomously. We now know that the ENS is not just capable of autonomy, but it also influences the brain. In fact, about 90% of signals passing along the vagus nerve come not just from above, but from the ENS. Despite these mind-blowing discoveries, interest in the enteric nervous system fell until many years later, when in the 1990s, the field of neurogastroenterology was born, and then the even newer field of psychogastroenterology. Neurogastroenterology encompasses the study of the gut, brain, and their interactions as related to the understanding and management of gut motility and functional GI disorders. Meanwhile, psychogastroenterology seeks to understand the complex web of links between psychological factors and gut-brain dysregulation. Researchers and practitioners in these fields continue to explore the gut-brain paradigm in order to identify and advocate for treatment strategies that address all pieces of the puzzle. Some examples of development in these areas are the use of low-dose antidepressants for IBS patients, as they can serve to calm symptoms by acting on the nerve cells in the gut. Another treatment strategy is the use of cognitive-based therapy, or CBT, or even acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, for the treatment of IBS and related pain management. So let's take a closer look at this amazing gut-brain axis. An axis is a connection between two systems. An axis is just a way to explain that things are connected. With any axis, it's always a two-way street. In the gut-brain axis, this means that the brain is communicating with the gut and the gut is communicating with the brains. It goes both ways. On a practical level, because our two brains talk to each other, therapies that help one may help the other. This is the part that's important. The gut-brain connection links your central nervous system, including your brain, with the enteric nervous system in your gut. As we said, the ENS is often dubbed the second brain, and it plays an important role not only in your digestive health, but also in your mental health. There are both physical and chemical connections between your gut and your brain, involving the vagus nerve, right? The large nerve that runs from your brain to your colon, and neurotransmitters, which are chemical messengers that help regulate digestion and emotional well-being. Your unique gut microbiome plays an important part in this connection. The gut microbiome, an ecosystem of trillions of bacteria and other microorganisms that live in your gut and are important for your health. The gut microbiome is unique to each individual and can actually weigh up to 6 pounds. It was previously thought that infants were born with a sterile gut. That is, a gut uncolonized by any microbial species. More recently, it's been suggested that colonization may begin prior to birth, with the fetus ingesting microbes from amniotic fluid. Further colonization occurs rapidly during and after birth, as the infant is exposed to microbes through contact with its mother, followed by interaction with others and its environment. Factors such as the mode of delivery, duration of hospital stay, preterm birth, and mode of feeding are all thought to have a long-term impact upon the composition of the microbiome. Many of these microbiome microbes live in the mucus layer that lines the intestines, placing them in direct contact with nerve and immune cells. Nerve cells and immune cells are the major information gathering systems of our body. This location also primes microbes to listen in as the brain signals stress, anxiety, or even happiness along the vagus nerve. But the microbiomes in our gut microbiome don't just listen. These cells produce modulating signals that send information back up to the brain. In fact, 90% of the neurons in the vagus nerve are actually carrying information from the gut to the brain, not just the other way around. This means the signals generated in the gut can massively influence the brain. The microbial population of the gut, or gut microbiota, previously called gut flora, is extremely dense, predominantly comprising bacteria. While a core community of gut microbiomes, approximately a third, is common to most healthy adults, the composition of each gut microbiota varies accordingly to factors like genetics, diet, age, state of health, and geographic location. Microbial colonization also changes along the length of the gut. So 2 different types of bacteria predominate the distal colon, while the smaller intestine contains greater numbers of two other bacteria. Now, irrespective of the individual composition, the gut microbiota performs broadly the same range of physiological functions in all healthy individuals. So, microbes are considered important, but probably not essential to digestion. Animals raised in completely microbe-free conditions, called germ-free animals, are able to survive with no gut microbiota, but must consume a larger quantity and broader range of essential nutrients to maintain health. This is primarily because the gut microbiota breaks down substances that the gut alone is unable to digest and is also involved in the synthesis of vitamins. It is clear that the gut microbiota plays a major role in health and disease, one that can be influenced by external factors, making an exciting area for research. We are now understanding the benefits of the microbial diversity in the gut, and prebiotic supplements and probiotic supplements and fecal transplants that have already been used to shift the gut microbiota to improve health. Now, check this out. The vagus nerve, known as the 10th cranial nerve, by the way, vagus is Latin for wandering, and indeed, this bundle of nerve fibers moves throughout the body, networking the brain with the stomach and the digestive tract, lungs, heart, spleen, liver, and kidneys. The vagus nerve provides parasympathetic innervation to the majority of the abdominal organs. It sends branches to the esophagus, stomach, and most of the intestinal tract, up to the splenic flexure of the large colon. The function of the vagus nerve is to stimulate smooth muscle contraction and glandular secretions in these organs. So for example, in the stomach, the vagus nerve increases the rate of gastric emptying, and it stimulates acid production. The vagus nerve is a part of the parasympathetic nervous system. But the vagus nerve is not the only nerve in the parasympathetic system, but it's by far the most important because it has the most far-reaching effects, such as in the brain. The vagus nerve helps control anxiety and depression. In the gut, it increases stomach acidity, digestive juices, and gut flow. In the heart, it controls heart and heart rate variability and blood pressure. Vagus activation will lower the risk for heart disease and stroke. In the liver and pancreas, it helps control glucose store and balance. In the gallbladder, it helps release bile, which can help you get rid of toxins and break down fat. It is responsible for not only carrying motor signals to the organs it innervates, but it also carries sensory information from these organs back to the central nervous system. The vagus nerve serves as a bi-directional information highway, with the brain and gut sending messages to each other within the order of milliseconds. The vagus nerve is responsible for the regulation of so many internal organs, right? Digestion, heart rate, respiratory rate, vasomotor activity, and certain reflex actions like coughing, sneezing, swallowing, and vomiting. So a low vagal tone means the vagus nerve isn't functioning as it should. This may lead to a heightened stress response, which becomes chronic, possibly resulting in depression, anxiety, gut issues, and inflammation. The vagus nerve sends an anti-inflammatory signal to other parts of the body, right? Lowering the heart rate and blood pressure. So if the vagus nerve is overactive, it can lead to the heart being unable to pump enough blood around the body. So just to reiterate, the vagus nerve is responsible for communication between the brain and the gut. The vagus nerve delivers information from the gut to the brain. Relaxation with deep breathing. The vagus nerve communicates with the diaphragm. With deep breaths, a person feels more relaxed. Decreasing inflammation. The vagus nerve sends an anti-inflammatory signal to other parts of the body. Lowering the heart rate and blood pressure. If the vagus nerve is overactive, it can lead to the heart being unable to pump enough blood around the body. In some cases, excessive vagus nerve activity can cause loss of consciousness and organ damage. And lastly, fear management. The vagus nerve sends information from the gut to the brain, which is linked to dealing with stress, anxiety, and fear, hence the saying, gut feeling. These signals help a person to recover from stressful and scary situations. Now, neurotransmitters are chemical messengers involved in a variety of functions in our body. They are produced in both your brain and your gut and are another part of the gut-brain connection. Your gut microbiome can influence the production of some neurotransmitters. These include serotonin and gamma-aminobutyric acid, known as GABA, which are both important to your emotional well-being. Your gut produces a large proportion of your body's serotonin, and studies have shown that your microbiome helps regulate this. In your gut, serotonin plays a role in processes, including digestion. However, the changes serotonin makes in your gut may also send signals to your brain that affect the production of neurotransmitters there. In your brain, serotonin is involved in mood and sleep. Your gut bacteria also produce the neurotransmitter GABA, which helps reduce stress, anxiety, and fear. Some animal studies have shown that boosting good gut bacteria, which with probiotics, can increase the production of GABA. Next up, the gut microbiome and the immune system. The immune system is the body's protection against disease. It's a network of cells, chemicals, and organs that work together to fight harmful bacteria, fungi, and viruses. It's also a crucial component of your gut-brain connection. Just as your immune system can impact your gut health, your gut microbiome can directly affect your immune system. A large proportion of your immune system is actually found in your gut. The gut contains almost 70% of the body's immune system. Research has shown that gut bacteria can have an effect on the immune cells in both your gut and your brain, indicating the gut microbiome's importance in immune health. Although there's still so much to learn about how the gut microbes affect the immune system and brain function, scientists know that bacteria in your gut can influence the level of proteins and cytokines. These proteins are essential to your body's inflammatory response and can affect brain function. Gut health and mental health. Although both gut health and mental health are complex, there's an increasing amount of evidence they influence each other. Mental health conditions like anxiety are often linked with chronic gut conditions like IBS. Recent research suggests that your gut bacteria can affect symptoms of anxiety and depression. Scientists have identified specific gut microbiomes that may be connected with mental health conditions. One study found that people with depression had fewer two types of bacteria, I'm going to not say these right, Dialister and Coprococcus in their guts. Study participants with more of these bacteria reported higher scores when researchers asked them about their quality of life. Scientists have also seen some encouraging results when investigating the use of fecal microbial transplants, or FMT, as experimental treatment for mental health conditions. FMT uses samples of poop containing bacteria from one person's gut microbiome, which researchers transplant into another person's gut. Several studies have shown that FMT from donors without mental health conditions improves symptoms in people who had depression and anxiety, although in many cases, the symptoms returned a few months later after the treatment had ended. Many neurological conditions such as Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, schizophrenia, and the autism spectrum disorder are correlated with GI issues or altered gut microbiome. Recent research on Parkinson's disease found that the enteric nervous system begins to degenerate before the classical symptoms of Parkinson's appear, and a dysfunctional gut microbiome is typical of this disease. There is a significant decrease in the quantity of microbiome in the gut microbiome of individuals with Alzheimer's disease, and an unhealthy diet is commonly cited as a risk factor for Alzheimer's. One explanation for this is the role of inflammation. Inflammation is a chronic symptom in many neurological conditions. Disruption in the health of the gut microbiome can trigger an immune response that leads to inflammation. Because over 70% of the body's immune cells are targeted to the digestive tract, which is helpful, like let's say in the case of ingesting toxic bacteria, but it also means that disruption of the health of the gut microbiome can launch a powerful inflammatory response in the body via the gut immune response. So maybe you've heard of the condition leaky gut syndrome. If not, you're going to be familiar with it now. It's also called increased intestinal permeability. So your gut is lined by a wall, which is similar to a net with small holes in them. These small holes act as filters and enable the passage of certain substances only. It acts as kind of a shield to keep out the bigger harmful substances from entering your body. When someone has a leaky gut, it means that the gut lining is damaged or it cannot optimally function as a barrier any longer. The smaller holes become larger and allow harmful substances like gluten, bad bacteria, and undigested food particles to enter your system and cause considerable damage to your health. Now, we all have some degree of leaky gut, as this barrier is not completely impenetrable, and it's not supposed to be. The problem is when it becomes too much. So what causes leaky gut? There are 4 main reasons for the syndrome. Number 1, dysbiosis. This is bacterial imbalance, and it's a leading cause of leaky gut syndrome. It means an imbalance between helpful and harmful species of bacteria in your GI tract. Number 2, prolonged exposure to stress. This can weaken your immune system and inhibit your body's ability to eliminate harmful bacteria and viruses, resulting in inflammation and leaky gut. Number 3, poor diet. So sugar and even a potential link between genetically modified foods or GMOs has been implemented here. And number 4, a toxic overload. This can lead to a leaky gut syndrome as well. So we can come across more than 80,000 chemicals and other toxic substances on a daily basis. 80,000, right? However, the main culprits are antibiotics, pesticides, aspirin, and contaminated tap water. Current scientific evidence suggests leaky gut may contribute to a range of medical conditions. Now, we already know that increased intestinal permeability plays a role in certain GI conditions like celiac disease, Crohn's disease, and irritable bowel syndrome. But the biggest question is whether or not leaky gut may cause problems elsewhere in the body. So although it's unusual to hear the term increased intestinal permeability in most doctors' offices, alternative and integrative medicine practitioners have worked on gut healing as an initial step to treat chronic diseases for decades. Other cultures around the world often recommend specific diets to make people feel better. Even in the United States, it's common to see people changing their diets after getting sick. A common initial step some practitioners take is to remove foods that can be inflammatory and that could promote changes in the gut flora. Among the most common are alcohol, processed foods, certain meds, and any foods that may cause allergies or sensitivities. Controversy still exists on whether or not leaky gut causes the development of diseases outside the GI tract in humans. However, it is always a good idea to eat a nutritious, unprocessed diet that includes food that help quell inflammation and avoid foods known to trigger inflammation. This may, at least in theory, right, help to rebuild the gut lining and bring more balance to the gut flora. Okay, in summary, maintaining a healthy gut contributes to better overall health and immune function. By making appropriate lifestyle and dietary changes, people can alter the diversity and the number of microbes in the gut for the better. Positive changes a person can make include taking probiotics, following a fiber-rich diet, and avoiding the unnecessary use of antibiotics and disinfectants. Often simple lifestyle changes that a person can make include getting enough sleep and exercising regularly make a huge difference. As OTs, we address the whole person. The gut-brain axis informs how we as OTs treat colorectal conditions and why we need to address the whole person. This is why, as you get into the treatment part of this course, you will see that besides for the obvious things we work on, we're always adding in stress relief activities, getting quality sleep, and nervous system regulation strategies. Addressing this is all within the realm of OTs. This is 100% in our wheelhouse. Remember that research on the gut-brain axis of disease is reasonably new. Concepts are changing rapidly, so this is something that I want you to keep your pulse on. It holds great promise for pelvic health clients. Now, below this lesson, I've listed a few books if you want to dive into this really fascinating topic a little bit more.